I have been thinking about what Hank Green said recently, that the self is an illusion, a fake idea created by natural selection to help genes pass themselves on. It is a pretty mind-bending concept, right? We all feel like we have a stable, individual self, a core identity that makes us us. But what if that feeling, that deep-seated sense of being a distinct individual, is actually just a sophisticated trick our biology plays to ensure our survival and, more importantly, the continuation of our genetic code? Let us demystify the self is an illusion together, really quickly. This is not about saying you do not exist or that your thoughts and feelings are not real. Instead, it suggests that the unified, persistent I you experience is not a single, fixed entity. It is more like a highly convincing narrative, constantly constructed and updated by your brain. Think of it as your brain's operating system, creating a coherent user interface for itself to navigate the world. This interface, this self, is incredibly useful. So, if it is an illusion, why did it evolve? The key is natural selection. For a trait to persist and become widespread, it must confer some advantage in survival and reproduction. Hank suggests that beings with a sense of self were simply better at passing their genes on. This implies a profound evolutionary benefit to having this internal narrative, this self. It is a powerful tool, honed over millions of years, designed not for philosophical purity, but for practical genetic propagation. To understand this, let us look at life without a self. Consider a single-celled organism like a bacterium. It reacts to its environment, moves towards food, away from toxins. It metabolizes, grows, and reproduces. It does not ponder its existence, plan for the future, or feel proud of its survival. There is no internal narrative, no I experiencing these processes. Its existence is pure stimulus response. Yet, bacteria have been incredibly successful at passing on their genes for billions of years. The foundation is that even basic organisms have mechanisms for self-preservation at a genetic level. Their cellular machinery is built to replicate, repair, and protect its DNA. This is not a conscious self saying, "I want to live." It is a biochemical imperative. As we move forward to more complex life, these simple imperatives begin to be orchestrated by increasingly sophisticated nervous systems, which introduce new ways to achieve the same fundamental goal: keep the genes going. What emerges is that as multicellular organisms developed, they faced new challenges. They needed ways to coordinate billions of cells, hunt, escape predators, and reproduce in a competitive world. Simple reflexes were not always enough. Imagine a sea slug. It reacts to touch, but likely has no conscious sense of itself as a distinct entity. It does not reflect on its slugness. Its actions are still largely automated, responses to stimuli. The key is that as brains grew more complex, they began to integrate vast amounts of sensory data and internal states. This led to the development of what some call a proto-self, a basic, non-conscious awareness of one's own body and its position in space. Think of a fish swimming. It has an internal map of its body relative to the water, allowing it to navigate. This is still far from the complex human self, but it is an important evolutionary step. From there, something interesting happens. This proto-self started to incorporate memory and predictions. An animal that remembers where it found food yesterday, or which path led to danger, has an advantage. This requires a rudimentary sense of continuity. I am the same organism that experienced that event. This is not self-reflection, but it is the brain building a more coherent model of its body interacting with the world over time. It is about learning and adapting. Building on that, the ability to recognize oneself as distinct from others or from the environment further enhances survival. Imagine a bird flocking. It needs to know where its own body ends and another bird's begins to avoid collisions. More profoundly, an animal that recognizes its own reflection, even in a primitive way, is demonstrating a step towards explicit self-awareness. This self-other distinction is crucial for navigating complex social dynamics and protecting one's own resources. The big reveal is that this emergent self allows for conscious agency. Instead of purely reactive behavior, an organism with a sense of self can make deliberate choices. If I am hungry, I can decide to search for food. If I perceive danger, I can choose to flee or hide. This is not just a reflex. It is a decision process influenced by memory, current needs, and anticipated outcomes. This enhanced decision-making dramatically improves survival rates. What is fascinating is how this sense of agency translates into better resource management. An animal with a sense of self does not just eat when it encounters food. It can actively seek out specific types of food it remembers liking or hoard resources for later. This proactive approach ensures a more consistent supply of energy, vital for growth, health, and, ultimately, reproduction. It moves beyond opportunistic foraging to strategic planning, all driven by the needs of myself. This leads to improved predator evasion. An animal that perceives itself as a target, rather than just a collection of cells reacting, will take more sophisticated evasive actions. It might remember a predator's hunting patterns, anticipate its movements, or even actively try to conceal its tracks. This is not merely fleeing, it is a strategic effort to preserve my life, enhancing the individual's odds of surviving long enough to reproduce. It is a game of wits, not just speed. Ultimately, a strong sense of self fosters a deep drive for self-preservation. When you perceive your own life as valuable and distinct, you are intrinsically motivated to protect it. This is not just about avoiding immediate threats, but about maintaining health, seeking shelter, and engaging in behaviors that prolong your existence. This fundamental will to live is a powerful engine for passing on genes, because you have to survive to reproduce. Let us examine how memory plays a huge role here. An animal without a robust sense of self might react to immediate stimuli, but it struggles to learn from its past. An animal with a developing self can store experiences. Last time I ate those berries, I got sick. Or, this territory has good hunting. This personal memory bank informs future decisions, allowing for more adaptive behaviors that increase the chances of survival and finding a mate. It is personalized data collection. Continuing on, this learning is not just about avoiding danger, it is also about optimizing opportunities. If an animal remembers a particularly fruitful foraging spot or a successful mating ritual, its self helps it repeat those beneficial actions. This iterative learning process, driven by the individual's experiences and its perceived benefit to itself, continually refines behavior, making the organism more efficient at navigating its environment and securing resources needed for reproduction. The ultimate insight is that personal experience, anchored by a sense of self, becomes a powerful survival mechanism. It is a feedback loop. I do something, I experience a consequence, I update my behavior. This continuous cycle of learning and adaptation, fueled by a cohesive self-narrative, allows individuals to thrive in unpredictable environments, outcompeting those who rely purely on instinct or basic reflexes. It turns an individual into a learning machine. What we find is that this self also grants the ability to plan for the future. A squirrel does not just bury nuts because of a pre-programmed instinct, it is also making a rudimentary prediction. Winter is coming, and I will be hungry. This involves mentally simulating future scenarios and anticipating needs. This forward-thinking capacity, stemming from a coherent sense of self that persists through time, is a massive evolutionary leap, far beyond simple present-moment reactions. This leads to goal-directed behavior. When an animal can envision a future state finding a specific mate, reaching a particular water source, it can then devise and execute a sequence of actions to achieve that goal. This requires internal motivation, persistence, and the ability to evaluate progress, all facilitated by a self that has desires and intentions. Such an individual is far more effective at fulfilling its biological imperatives than one merely responding to the immediate environment. The result? Reduced vulnerability. An organism that can plan, predict, and strategize is less likely to fall prey to unforeseen dangers or succumb to famine. It can prepare for droughts, cold snaps, or the arrival of migratory predators. This foresight, intrinsically tied to a continuous self that projects into the future, significantly boosts its chances of surviving harsh conditions and reproducing. ensuring its genes make it to the next generation. What emerges is that this future-oriented self allows for true delayed gratification. Instead of consuming all resources immediately, an individual can choose to save them for a better time or a greater need. This complex cognitive ability requires suppressing immediate urges for a long-term benefit, a hallmark of advanced planning. This strategic restraint is a direct consequence of a self that values its future existence over its present comfort. Again, a boon for passing on genes. Now imagine how this self interacts in a social context. For species that live in groups, understanding others is critical. A sense of self, the ability to model me, provides a framework for understanding you. If I can recognize my own intentions, I can infer yours. This theory of mind is a direct extension of self-awareness and is fundamental for cooperation, avoiding conflict, and forming alliances, all behaviors that enhance group survival and, by extension, individual gene propagation. What we discover is that empathy, too, is rooted in this understanding. When you see another individual suffering, yourself can, to some extent, simulate their experience. This allows for compassion and altruism, which, surprisingly, can be beneficial for gene passing. Helping a relative or a group member, even at a slight cost to yourself, can ensure the survival of shared genes or strengthen social bonds that protect you in the long run. It is not purely selfless from an evolutionary view. Expanding from that, a sense of self enables complex communication. If I know what I want or need, I can better articulate it to others. This is not just basic alarm calls, but nuanced signals, gestures, and eventually language, allowing for the sharing of knowledge, planning of group activities, and coordinating defense. Effective communication is a cornerstone of advanced social structures, which greatly enhance the collective survival and reproductive success of the individuals within them. The result is better cooperation. When individuals recognize themselves as part of a larger unit and can attribute intentions to others, they can work together more effectively. Hunting large prey, building shelters, raising offspring collectively. These tasks are dramatically improved by cooperation. This requires a sophisticated sense of individual identity within a group identity, where my efforts contribute to our success, which ultimately benefits me and my genes. What becomes clear is that a sense of self allows for social competition and status. In many species, higher social status means better access to resources and mates. An individual with a strong self can strive for status, understand dominance hierarchies, and strategically navigate social challenges. This is not just brute force, it is often about social intelligence, reputation, and perceived strength. The self becomes a player in a complex social game, all for genetic advantage. Ultimately, the point is that these social benefits are directly linked to reproductive success. Individuals who cooperate well, gain status, communicate effectively, and display empathy are often more attractive to potential mates. They are also better at protecting and raising their offspring within a supportive group. The self thus becomes a crucial component in navigating the intricate world of social relationships, ensuring the optimal conditions for passing on one's genetic legacy. So, the big picture? A sense of self profoundly boosts an organism's chances of survival. When you have a unified I that remembers, plans, decides, and interacts socially, you become a much more robust individual. This increased robustness directly translates to a greater likelihood of living long enough to find a mate, successfully reproduce, and ensure that your offspring also survive to reproduce. The self is the ultimate evolutionary upgrade for self-preservation. The key is that this is not just about individual survival. It is about securing your genetic legacy. Every decision made by a self, from avoiding a predator to finding the best food source, is, from an evolutionary perspective, a strategy to keep those genes flowing. The self acts as a highly effective manager for the genetic material it carries, optimizing every aspect of existence to maximize the chances of reproduction and the successful rearing of viable offspring. Think about parental care. A creature without a strong sense of self might abandon its young more readily when faced with danger. But a parent with a robust self can feel a profound connection to its offspring, seeing them as extensions of its own genetic future. This personal investment drives immense protective behaviors and sacrifices, ensuring the survival of the next generation. The self extends beyond the individual to encompass the legacy. Where this takes us is a fascinating journey through evolutionary time. When did this self truly begin to emerge? It was not a sudden switch. It is a spectrum. From the simplest proto-self in early animals, focused on body-environment distinction, to the complex, reflective, autobiographical self we humans experience. Each step conferred a slight reproductive advantage, pushing the evolution of consciousness further piece by piece across millions of years. Initially, perhaps, it was simply about motor control and proprioception, knowing where your limbs are without looking. Then, it incorporated rudimentary memory of past actions and consequences. Further refinement brought anticipation and planning. With each cognitive upgrade, the self became a more effective tool for individual navigation and interaction, making the organism more competitive in the race to reproduce. It was a gradual layering of complexity. Following that, social dynamics accelerated the process. Being able to predict what another self might do, or to manipulate another's perception of yourself, became incredibly valuable. This drove the evolution of larger, more intricate brains capable of complex social cognition. The self was not just about individual survival anymore. It was about thriving within a community, leveraging social intelligence for genetic gain. The mirrors of other minds reflected and refined our own. The final piece of this puzzle really solidifies with abstract thought and language. Once a self could symbolize itself, name itself, and share its internal state through language, a new level of complexity emerged. This allowed for cultural transmission of knowledge, collective memory, and the creation of shared narratives. The human self became not just a biological construct, but a cultural one, constantly reinforced and shaped by interaction, hugely increasing its adaptive power. But does Hank mean for humans specifically? While humans certainly possess the most developed and complex sense of self, the underlying principle applies to many species. Any organism that benefits from enhanced individual decision-making, learning, planning, and social interaction will develop some form of self. It is a continuum, not an on-off switch, with varying degrees of self-awareness present across the animal kingdom. We are just at the far complex end. Think about a dog. Does it have a self? It clearly recognizes its own name, shows agency, and remembers past events. It forms bonds and reacts to social cues. While it might not reflect on its mortality or write a memoir, its experience of being is far beyond that of a bacterium. This level of self is advantageous because it makes the dog better at surviving, learning, and interacting with its human companions, which is its niche for passing on genes. What about other mirror test-passing animals like dolphins or elephants? Their ability to recognize themselves in a reflection suggests a higher level of self-awareness, akin to a toddler's. This cognitive capacity would certainly enhance their complex social structures, communication, and problem-solving abilities within their respective environments. These are all traits that would improve their survival and reproductive success, demonstrating that the self is a widespread evolutionary advantage. The simplest way to see it is that the self is not some mystical, unexplainable essence. It is a highly sophisticated biological mechanism, a narrative crafted by our brains. Its purpose is not to define our soul, but to make us exceptionally good at being alive, at learning, adapting, and navigating the world around us. And by doing that, it makes us exceptionally good at the one thing natural selection cares about, propagating our genes. The core idea is that this illusion is our brain's best strategy for maximizing its vehicle's performance. Just as a race car driver needs a dashboard with clear readouts to control the car, our brain creates the self to manage our body, thoughts, and interactions effectively. This internal coherence allows for optimal functioning, translating directly into better odds of winning the evolutionary race, which is, quite simply, to reproduce. The biggest lesson here is to appreciate the sheer ingenuity of evolution. It does not need a grand plan or a conscious designer. It simply favors what works. And a self, however illusory it might feel upon reflection, undeniably works to ensure genes are passed on. It is a testament to the power of natural selection to create incredibly complex, yet pragmatic, solutions to the fundamental challenge of survival and reproduction. What matters most is recognizing that this self is a dynamic process, not a static entity. It is constantly being updated by our experiences, memories, and interactions. The illusion is not that you do not exist, but that the you today is precisely the same you of yesterday, or that there is a single, unchanging core. It is more like a river than a stone, always flowing, always changing, yet maintaining a recognizable form. This fluidity is part of its adaptive genius. If you remember one thing, it is that the self is a masterpiece of biological engineering. It is the ultimate internal management system, optimized to make you a highly effective survival and reproduction machine. So next time you ponder who you are, consider it through the lens of evolution. You are a culmination of billions of years of trial and error, a living testament to a successful genetic strategy, all held together by this incredibly convincing yet ultimately illusory self. The central message is that our subjective experience of self is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. That end is the propagation of genes. Our feelings, our thoughts, our consciousness, these are all emergent properties that serve this fundamental biological drive. It is a beautifully complex system designed for function, not for abstract truth. And this functional design has been incredibly successful, which is why we are here to talk about it. A quick thought experiment about self-awareness. Imagine a robot designed solely to collect certain resources. It has sensors, manipulators, and programming. It does not feel like a robot or think about its purpose. Now, imagine a more advanced robot that develops an internal model of itself relative to its environment and other robots. This proto-self allows it to strategize better, avoid damage, and optimize resource collection, making it more successful at its core programming. The surprising truth about this illusion is its power. It is not a weakness or a flaw, but a strength that propelled life forward. From simple cellular replication to complex human civilization, the self has been a driving force. It grants us a narrative, a sense of continuity, and agency, all incredibly effective tools for survival, reproduction, and ultimately ensuring that the genetic information we carry continues its journey through time. It is an illusion with real, tangible benefits. I want to show you something cool about how this links to our emotional lives. Our emotions, like fear, joy, or sadness, are deeply intertwined with our sense of self. Fear protects me from danger. Joy indicates my well-being or success. Sadness often relates to loss to me or my group. These emotions are not arbitrary. They are powerful motivators and feedback mechanisms, further enhancing the self's ability to guide us towards gene-propagating behaviors. The fundamental truth is that even our capacity for subjective experience, for truly feeling like we exist, is an evolutionary adaptation. It is the ultimate internal reward system, making survival and reproduction intrinsically satisfying. When an animal feels the pleasure of eating or the relief of escaping danger, it reinforces those behaviors. This feeling is the self's way of motivating its vehicle to keep driving forward, always in the direction of genetic continuity. Here is what everyone gets wrong about this idea. They think illusion means not real. But in this context, it means a construct that feels real. Your sense of self is as real as your experience of color, even though color itself is how your brain interprets wavelengths of light. It is a functional reality. The self is the brain's unique way of organizing information to create an agent that is incredibly effective at ensuring the perpetuation of its own genetic blueprint. Let me connect the dots on how this plays out in human culture. Our entire concept of morality, law, and personal responsibility is built upon the assumption of a continuous, responsible self. If there is no I to be accountable, society as we know it would crumble. So, the self not only evolved for biological reasons, but has been deeply woven into our social fabric, reinforcing its utility and further enhancing the survival and reproductive success of groups and individuals. Ready to rethink how you see yourself? This perspective does not diminish your importance, it reframes it. You are not merely a vessel for your genes, but a sophisticated, self-organizing system that evolved precisely because having a self made those genes so successful. Your experiences, your personality, your unique story, these are all part of the intricate, dynamic narrative that your brain generates to keep you thriving, learning, and ultimately passing on your unique blueprint. This changed how I see the purpose of consciousness. It is not just a happy accident, it is a finely tuned instrument. The subjective experience of me is a sophisticated control panel that allows for flexible, adaptive behavior far beyond what simple reflexes can achieve. The richer the self-narrative, the more complex the behaviors, and the greater the potential for mastering an environment and ensuring evolutionary success. It is purpose-built for survival. What if the self was not what you thought? It is not a spirit or a soul in the traditional sense, but a product of biology, chemistry, and physics emerging from the incredibly complex interactions within your brain. Understanding this does not lessen its wonder. It makes it even more astonishing. The fact that a collection of neurons can generate this powerful, functional illusion of you is one of the most incredible feats of natural selection. It is a biological masterpiece. The takeaway is this: Hank Green's statement, far from being dismissive, is a profound insight into our deepest nature. The self is not an error, it is an elegant, adaptive strategy. It is the sophisticated user interface of our incredibly complex biological machinery, designed specifically to navigate the world, survive, thrive, and ultimately ensure the perpetuation of life itself. It is the evolutionary advantage that allowed our genes, and yours, to make it this far. So, the question of when beings gained a sense of self does not have a single answer. It was a gradual evolutionary ascent, a continuous refinement of internal models and cognitive capacities. From the earliest neural networks distinguishing self from not self, to the mirror-recognizing animals, and finally to our uniquely human reflective and autobiographical self, it is a story of increasing complexity driven by the relentless pressure of natural selection. It was advantageous because it turned passive, reactive life into active, strategic agents. This shift from being to being aware of being unlocked countless possibilities for survival and reproduction. It allowed for planning beyond the moment, learning from complex experiences, and navigating intricate social landscapes. This increased agency, all centered around a perceived self, was a game-changer in the ongoing saga of life on Earth. The main thing to remember is that our subjective identity, this feeling of I, is an incredibly powerful evolutionary tool. It is the central hub for processing information, making decisions, and orchestrating behavior that ultimately serves the propagation of our genes. It is a testament to how natural selection finds ingenious solutions, even if those solutions feel like the most fundamental, unquestionable aspect of our existence. Your self is a gift from evolution. What I want you to walk away with is a deeper appreciation for the amazing processes that shaped who you are. The self, this intricate narrative you experience, is not a philosophical abstract, but a highly effective biological strategy. It is the reason why you, specifically, are so good at surviving, learning, and connecting. And by being good at those things, you have ensured that the story of your genes continues, just as Hank Green suggested. In a nutshell, your sense of self is a highly evolved, compelling story your brain tells itself. It is a narrative that binds your past, present, and anticipated future, providing coherence and agency. This story, this self, is ultimately designed to make you a more successful contender in the game of life, ensuring you persist, reproduce, and pass on your unique set of instructions. It is a functional fiction, a beneficial illusion. So, the self is not just for philosophical introspection. It is a powerful adaptive engine. This engine, honed by natural selection, drives behaviors that lead to mating, raising offspring, and ensuring the continuity of your genetic line. It is the ultimate personal motivation. Every choice, every emotion, every memory that defines you contributes to this grand, overarching biological imperative. The self is the executive suite for your genes, The most important part of this discussion is recognizing the profound connection between our internal world and external success. The more coherent and robust our self, the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of life. This is not just about feeling good, it is about being effective. And in the grand scheme of evolution, effectiveness is measured by one thing: the successful transmission of your genes to the next generation.